the UFC is easily one of the fastest growing sports in the world, and we can see that in terms of popularity. But what a lot of people don't know is actually how it all began, which is a quite interesting story. So there's this Gracie family. Now, for those of you who don't know, Brazil and Japan have very historical relations. The most Japanese people in the world that live outside of Japan actually live in Brazil. So there's this taxi driver in Brazil, skinny guy, and he's driving around this world-class Japanese jiu-jitsu fighter. And so they get along really well in the car ride, and then the Japanese jiu-jitsu fighter's like, okay, I'll show you some moves, right? And so he shows him some moves, and the Brazilian is like, oh, this is great, but like I'm kind of so much weaker than you, like I can't use any of these. And so he takes all what he learns and he kind of engineers it, he tweaks it, keeps the good stuff, kind of gets rid of the stuff that he finds you can't really use if you're a weaker guy, and then they add in a bunch of new stuff, and to this day, like, so much more stuff gets added in by generation. So that's how it started in the really early 1900s, late 1800s. And then in the 20s, 1925, I think, they opened up a school, the Gracie School of Jiu-Jitsu, and they started this challenge, the Gracie Challenge. Anyone, it didn't matter who you were, if you were a kickboxer, karate guy, an arm wrestler, street fighter, whatever, if you could beat one of them, you'd get a cash prize. I think it was like $10,000 or $100,000. It was a lot of money, especially at that time. And so they do this challenge, and no one beats them. No one gets to claim the money, right? And so they open a gym in California. Same thing. They open the Gracie Challenge, and all these people come in, like boxers, kickboxers, a former student, and the former student in that fight was 3 hours and 45 minutes because there was no time limit. There was no scoring. The fights would end by submission or knockout, or you lose consciousness, or if like I'm sure if like there was crazy bleeding, it would get called. And funny enough, they actually had a bodybuilder, Mr. Utah. He challenged one of the Gracies. He lost to an armbar. It wasn't a crazy fight. Like, he maybe took a few punches to the nose, and then he charged the Gracie, kind of tackled him over. The Gracie eventually gets an armbar on him, and that was kind of it. But anyway, so the Gracie challenge goes so well, no one's able to claim the cash prize. So eventually they organize it, and they make it kind of more worldwide, and they call it all these fighters, right? And so all these fighters come through, and whoever wants it can get it. There was wrestlers, I think there was like an arm wrestler, karate people, sumo wrestlers, like just everybody was there, right? Boxers, to represent their arts. And it was a tournament set up, no time limit, no score. The way you finish a fight is by submission or knockout, right? And there's no weight classes either, right? So the first fight is a 400-pound sumo wrestler versus a 200-pound kickboxer from the Netherlands. The sumo wrestler's from Hawaii. And so what happens is the sumo wrestler rushes him. The kickboxer backs away, jab, cross, jab, cross. The sumo wrestler, I think he kind of like goes for a takedown, but he also kind of trips, falls over. The kickboxer kind of pushes him away, and then he hits him with a head kick. The head kick then kicks out 3 of the sumo wrestler's teeth. The teeth, 2 of them get stuck in the kickboxer's foot, and the other tooth goes flying into the announcers. And so then the fight gets called. He has a bloody face. That was the start of the UFC. No one knew what to expect. Definitely wasn't that, and it was just craziness. And so it blew up, right? Like, it was a crazy beginning. Everyone loved it, and each fight was just crazy, right? Like, no one knew what to expect, and these wild fights would take place, right? And so it was a tournament, but the end result was Royce Gracie, one of the family members of the Gracie family, wins it all. And supposedly the reason they chose Royce was not because he was the biggest or the strongest, but because he was actually kind of the skinniest and the weakest. And they wanted to represent their arts as like more effective, as opposed to it just being like an athlete, but more effective at defeating bigger opponents, more powerful, more athletic, more aggressive opponents. Now, that was back then, of course. Today, the sport's evolved a lot. There's weight classes now because there's a lot of controversy. Boxing commissions kind of got in the way, and they said, like, you guys don't even wear gloves, it's not safe, but yada, yada, yada. So today, there's much more regulations around it, and also, like, it's usually not just like someone's a pure boxer or like a pure wrestler. Like jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu is more so focused on like the groundwork, grappling. It's not really strong on like takedowns. Striking is virtually not even involved in the sport, or the art, I should say. So yeah, today, like, people usually will have like a very solid boxing foundation, or wrestling foundation, and then they'll also mix it in. They'll learn like Muay Thai, they'll learn judo, like whatever, right? And they blend it together so that they're like a well-rounded fighter. Then you get all the great stuff today, right? Which would have destroyed people back then.